Thank you. This is a meeting of the Cross-Sector Mitigation Subcommittee, January 16, and the agenda is posted on the council website. We've had some difficulty assembling today because the Zoom links weren't working, but they appear to now be working. And the correct link is now on the council website as well for any members of the public who would like to join us today. And I hope that they'll be able to do that. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss and ask questions and to come to some understanding of the full suite of recommendations that the subcommittee can make at this point to the full council for consideration at the next full council meeting. We've gone through these recommendations, particularly the priority recommendations, repeatedly, but there are some additional recommendations that we want to focus on in today's conversation. And I'll just ask whether anybody else has comments to make about today's meeting and the agenda right at the outset.
Rich, I'd just been hoping this might be really obvious, but it would be helpful for me, especially with the buildings and thermal, to understand whether there were updates made since the council meeting and comments that we received. And obviously for all of them, but to the extent anything's new, having that highlighted rather than going over first what we've seen before.
Thank you. So changes either, in response to what we heard at the council meeting or in the committee, the task group discussions since then, it would be good to highlight those. That's a good ask. Thank you. I should ask that, do we have a recommended order of going through the materials? Melissa, do you?
I think on the agenda we put actually put non-energy first, which was going to be Liz's update.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll share that now. You folks could see my screen. Oh, awesome.
Yes.
So I had at a previous cross-sector meeting, I had shown what we were working on. So some of this will look familiar. And then there were some strategies that I was still working on getting updates from the implementers from. So just to start off though, one of the bigger changes that we made, which is kind of like the structure of this, the strategies here, like with reducing emissions of refrigerants, and different strategies laid out with wastewater treatment and waste in general were originally different pathways, and we changed that to be all under one pathway of non-energy. So further reduce non-combustion emissions through development of strategies that look at refrigerants, semiconductors, waste, and wastewater. And so then everything that's laid out here is in the strategies below. This first section, I had spoken with Jane, who's managing the grant with VIC from Agency of Natural Resources, and these were the revisions that she recommended. So there's this one that's being implemented currently, and then there's the incentives piece with the refrigerants and the transition that is not currently, there's no action taken yet. And then I had a question about whether or not we should add anything about heat pumps, and she recommended the consider appropriateness of adding heat pump to Act 65. So that's this first section.
Can you pause here just to give us a chance to read the exact words and ask questions?
Could you kindly increase the size just a little?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that good?
Thanks, Christine, for the heads up. I think we'll still have a quorum if we lose you. but if anyone else needs to leave early, please let us know.
I need to as well.
Okay, should we continue to scroll?
Yep. So the strategies relate to the semiconductor manufacturing process, and 2 actions below here. So I'll give everyone a moment to read it.
Do you mind if I ask a question, Liz, just for my understanding as you scroll? So I understand you collapsed it into a pathway. Are the strategies themselves identical to what was in the plan, and that's why the column on the right is, you know, advancing, already implemented, et cetera, or not?
When you say already in the plan, do you mean in the initial plan?
Yeah, I guess, yes. I guess I'm wondering, yes, that's what I'm wondering. Advancing from what? From the language that was identical from the last plan?
No, like this, what's advancing right now is these 2 actions, like what
And
is
those,
next?
yep, and were those 2 actions identical to what appears in the
No.
last plan?
It was different than what's in the last plan. Though,
Okay,
yeah.
I was
it's
hoping,
different. Yep.
yeah, I was hoping to make our review easier, but so it's both the language and, yeah, I don't know, the format is confusing to me. Maybe just me.
Liz, with respect to the second item here on the screen, what's the scuttlebutt on the likelihood of getting funding through CHIPS? Says,
I'm not sure.
because across the whole industry, this was an important topic. It's not just important in Vermont. So but you can't tell us right now whether there's a national program underway to advance this work.
I'd have to go back, but yeah, I can't recall at the moment.
Okay, that's fine. And plus there's no telling how those funds would be allocated during the next few years. So just wondered if there was, something that we could link up with pretty quickly. We just don't know that. You want to keep scrolling?
I'm sorry if I'm backing up too much, and I know we're pressed for time, but these are not the recommendations that were put forward from the task group, or are they're slightly modified from that? I'm not following why we're reviewing them again if we already put them forward as a subcommittee.
So some of these I did present on earlier in cross sector, but some of them, like these 2 on semiconductor, we hadn't yet done it, or there were some details with wastewater that I was working on, like getting information from state implementers. So this is just for awareness purposes of like what's in here. There wasn't like a task group on non-energy. I was supporting that work, just in terms of linking up with state implementers and getting the latest information to either revise or update these actions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So we still have the job today of approving the language that's here.
So I'll just keep scrolling down.
Yeah, talk us through wastewater.
Okay. So this strategy is related to reducing emissions from wastewater treatment facilities, ensuring flares are operational, existing anaerobic digesters at wastewater treatment facilities. So the survey was completed. I had connected with folks from DEC about this, and then the specifics that we added into the second action are like what it was identified like which actual facilities need to be updated, and we include that in this action here. And so there's like an awareness that like when this update happens, they've identified what needs, like where these facilities need to be updated. So that's why this is updated here.
Thank you.
Yep. Sam, did you have a question?
No, I'm just thinking if we have a specific strategy on wastewater, although I see it's more specifically on fugitive emissions, I'd love to see a consideration of waste heat recovery in our wastewater facility projects going forward.
Christine?
Can someone briefly explain the difference between something being named advancing versus being named being implemented? I don't happen to understand the difference intuitively.
Advancing is in the design planning phase, whereas being implemented is it's occurring.
Thank you.
Yep. If there's not any other on these, I could keep scrolling.
Do we want to add something about thermal recovery on the from wastewater treatment facilities? Sam, was that?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, we have a lot of with the new Home Act, et cetera, a lot of our smaller villages are seriously looking at new, like totally novel wastewater systems. So it seems like a real lost opportunity not to integrate something to ensure that we're establishing totally novel systems with this efficiency built in. Because I mean, it reduces the amount of, I mean, it depends, at least some amount of thermal demand that needs to be electrified. So, I think that's a pretty big no-brainer. But
Yep. Sam,
So-
I could either send you this link if you want to add in the language to the template, or you could send me the language and I could update it and then, recirculate this again if that's helpful next step for folks.
Joey, did you just chime in on this point?
Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion, and I mean, I don't know enough about the resources, and so I just, maybe it's like explore, and like maybe it's a little squishy language, so I would defer to Sam, but I think it's a very important point, so I just wanted to support it.
Sam, as we move on through this list, could I ask you to write a number 3?
I can
Under
try.
wastewater? That would be along the lines that you and Joey have both spoken to. And then the committee can decide whether to support it or not, but we need some language to look at.
Okay.
Strategy 14A.
So
Yeah, help us out here. It's pretty skeletal.
with 14A waste reduction, this is a section that wasn't included in the last cap in terms of waste reduction and food waste in general. So I connected with Josh Kelly from DEC, and these were recommended recommendations from general waste with the reduce reuse repair network to maintain the related website that's happening right now. So that's where these actions came from. And I'll give folks a moment to read it through if there's any other questions or comments. And there's another section to this that's on the next page.
And and one thing that's lacking here is a statement of who would be the implementers.
Yeah, that's on the larger Excel, though we could include it in the action itself, but a lot of this is in through that department at the state.
Okay, so there's another document that lists who would be the implementers for these different actions.
Yeah, but we could still put that in the actions though, if that's helpful to identify. But yeah, there are notes on another Excel that wouldn't necessarily be in the published version of the cap if we're just showing these things, but that information is there.
Because I mean, this committee has made a point of trying to identify the responsible pathways for implementation. in some of our other test groups. So um, whether it's in the appendix or whether it's in the, the text of the strategies, we can decide later. But I just wanted to make sure that the putting this together, that there's you have ideas about where this should rest, or a lot of these actions are already underway in existing state agencies.
Yep.
Uh, um, okay.
All right, and then this just continues, so I just want to make sure folks could see everything.
Andrea, do you want to comment out loud about?
Sorry, I'm munching. I was just saying that in the initial cap, the implementers are identified. So I guess I'm a little unclear right now of what the format of the new plan might look like, or how that might be different from the initial plan. And so I'm just saying it is in the initial plan, the implementers are identified. So I would imagine that that is something we would carry through, but I'm not sure.
Thank you. All right, general and special recycling.
Yep. So again, same state implementer here through DEC, whether it's the promotional pages, through media and outreach, and then at the bottom here, there's an action related to a report that would help inform future conversations about Vermont bottle bill and recycling systems, and just acknowledging that this report's underway, but the findings are not yet there.
Okay. Are we at the bottom?
That's it.
Okay. Committee conversation, questions on this?
To what extent those items that we just went over are really good things to do? It's hard to measure their benefits. They're targeted at specific programs at DEC that are probably great, but there's probably a whole lot more to be done in that area if we're to really move forward on it. Do we include those things? I mean, we have a similar situation going on in transportation where there are lots of programs that make people more healthy or have access to transportation, but to what extent is that going to address the climate issue specifically? They're really important things to do, and recycling programs are super important. But what we're talking about here is a very wide basket, and we've got a couple of programs that we're highlighting that are in DEC, which is great. But there's, if we were going to really dig into that, if that was proven to be important in terms of emissions reductions, we should have much more detailed language. That's my one observation of that, the last thing we were just talking about. And I don't know enough about the other programs to say it's a similar situation. Am I making sense?
Yes. You're making sense. And the way to, it's unclear here, as you say, how big these measures are with respect to the mission of the Climate Council.
Yeah, there's constant mission creep here. Constant, because addressing climate change is so big. So, yeah, of course it's important for a whole bunch of reasons. But how do you characterize that to bring it forward in the final report?
So the question before us, it seems to me, is the degree to which, any of the strategies here qualify as the high priority actions, and which ones are desirable actions that are listed, in the appendix to the report, as with other categories. So I think when we get done our conversation on this, we should have a discussion of which ones of these are priorities that would be identified as such. Joey?
Liz, can you scroll up so we can see the ones that are no action taken? I mean, to Rich's point in terms of what we recommend as priorities, provide incentives for business. I mean, I think this is probably good. I just don't have enough information on some of these to understand on balance, including this sort of points to what Gina was saying, the sort of cost benefit. They seem like good things, but I just lacking a little core.
Okay, Liz, you may have recommendations, as to which of these are high priority for cross-sector, because the GWP gains from these policies are quite large compared with ones that the marginal gains are much smaller. Or whether some of them should be high priorities, notwithstanding that there's not a lot of tons there. So can we first identify the things that we know are high priority because the global warming potentials are high? And my guess is that the refrigerant management ones are the high ones. And in addition, the semiconductor manufacturing is probably pretty substantial. So thoughts on that?
In general, we're recommending like the no action taken are focused on in terms of the prioritization.
Well, the current refrigerant management program is, it's out there and, it's happening, but this recommendation is continue doing it. And my understanding is that there's the opportunities are there, and that the GWPs associated with changing these refrigerants are pretty substantial. So in this category, this strategy 11A being implemented could be a priority, and the two that are labeled no action taken could also be priorities, because the topic area is important enough. And that would go for 12A as well. I'm trying to I'm proposing that in order to advance our discussion, and so we can wrap this one up and move on. Do people feel differently?
Rich, I think I'm a little reluctant to identify priorities here. I thought we'd passed that stage, and what we lifted up to the council was kind of cross-sectors priorities. I recognize some of these might emerge as priorities with more data, but I'd be reluctant for us to make that decision on the fly. I thought that really the intent here was to go through the suite of recommendations for inclusion.
Oh, okay. I think that's fine. It's true. We already identified these as high priorities.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. Then if we're good.
Okay. Sam, do you want to read your proposed language for the heat recovery at wastewater treatment plants?
Um, Sure. Explore requiring waste heat recovery capabilities in all new wastewater system projects and significant system expansions funded via state wastewater programs, including those associated with state designations. Lead implementer ACCD DEC. Although I'm now thinking that, Liz, your recommendations are specifically non-energy, so this might actually go under um, thermal.
Now that for the moment, let's just
Okay.
stick it here. So your language has the word requiring. Um, without more information, I think we might want to consider requiring that consideration and where cost effective implementation.
Yeah, just as explore requiring, so you could come up with a decision not to require it,
Oh,
but that's fine.
explore requiring. Okay. No, that's good. No, if
Can you plop that in the chat, Sam?
It's already there.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
It's gone.
I just would like to see in there somewhere cost effectiveness, because money is tight. Towns really need this in order to grow in a more dense way, and we don't want to be adding burden. So yes, if it works and it's cost effective,
Yeah,
that's my
it's
only. Yeah, this
yeah, I mean
money is super tight.
yeah, I mean, I would say it certainly is cost effective, medium long term. So I think it really depends on how you define cost effective. And I think the whole point of it is it ultimately typically saves both Vermonters and the municipality money. But
so
I hear you.
Not helping
So-
up front to get it going. Anyway,
how about the following amendment? A friendly amendment. Explore requiring waste heat recovery capabilities where cost effective in new
no.
and take out all and add where cost effective. I think that's where where we would end up in the real world anyway. So could you, Sam, make a note of that? And I'm conscious of the fact that right at this moment that we have not identified a note taker for this meeting. And this conversation reminds me that we should have done that.
Rich, I pinged Brian. Brian's going to take some notes, and I'm also supplementing notes.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make
Thanks.
sure we get this
Absolutely.
wordsmithing down. Okay. Any other comments with respect to the full list of strategies that you've seen here on non-energy?
I'll add in what Sam has sent and circulate that to the folks in non-energy.
Okay. How do you want to proceed with respect to this list of recommendations? And Liz, what did you say you were going to circulate?
I was saying, so I'm realizing now, Sam, you said this could also go in buildings and thermal, but if this recommendation were to go into non-energy, I could add this to the existing template and just send it to cross-sector again, with the updated spreadsheet to include this, if you would like this recommendation to go into non-energy.
The waste heat recovery one? Um, I don't have a strong opinion, but it seems to me it kind of lives with wastewater treatment facilities more than with thermal.
Okay.
Uh,
Then I'll add this to that template and just send an updated template after this.
Okay. I'm also reading TJ's observation that we don't have data to suggest where the tons are here. And this could be we could make a request of ANR to give us a review on whether the potential here is high, low, or medium. That's about the best we're going to get. I think for the refrigerant management program and for the semiconductor manufacturing element, I haven't seen the numbers recently, but there are analysis has been done to suggest how big those things are. So it would be good to have that on hand if we're going to make a recommendation to the council on those priorities. And at least at the moment, Liz, it looks like that's a request that I'm making on behalf of the subcommittee to you. But it seems like if those data don't exist, then we need to just acknowledge that. If they do exist, which is likely, then we need to have them in hand if we make this recommendation to the council.
I don't know if it exists. I could check and circle back to cross-sector. I don't know if Brian knows more.
I mean, these aren't new
Right.
topics. And we have a refrigerant management program underway for good reason. So VEIC at least has data on this.
Okay.
As for Global Foundries, there may be some commercial and confidentiality reasons for those data not to be made public, but we ought to be able to get an indication whether the savings associated with the policy are large or very large or medium.
I could check and circle back.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Anything further on this topic? Because we need to move on. We're open after each of these sections to public comment. And I'll ask whether any members of the public want to address the committee at this point. All right, hearing none. Are folks okay to move on to?
Yeah, Rich, the way I was envisioning, and sorry, you and I didn't pin this down, but was, subcommittee members would flag any areas of non-consensus. I'm not hearing any, but like basically take the temperature of the group on this set of recommendations. And that at this point we'd flag anything that wasn't going to advance as consensus. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Was in here just long enough to confirm that we don't have any areas of non-consensus. What we have is a request for some additional information so that we can let the council know which of these we believe are the most important.
Yep.
Adam, welcome. Okay. What's next?
We had electricity up next. But I don't think have a suite of recommendations beyond the priorities.
Right. So I asked Liz if she'd be prepared just to put up that the screen of priorities, we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. We've already approved them. But just to remind us where we are on that. And I'll ask Liz Miller if she has anything to add that she thinks cross-sector should be working on to add to this list.
I think no, not for this subcommittee at this time before the next climate council meeting, in my understanding. However, I think the action item, Rich, for the task group, if the climate council seeks it, depending on what happens at the next meeting, is to probably reconvene as we discussed, right? I mean, it's you, me, TJ, Sam, and Peter. And we have not done so or advanced it since last we spoke to the council. So I don't have anything further to add on that, other than noting that perhaps we need to do that depending upon the outcome of the upcoming meeting.
Okay. Any comments about the priority actions that you've previously seen? Hearing none, should we move on? These were aired pretty well at the last subcommittee meeting.
That's the right slide for what's next.
Okay, thanks. Every time I put the full screen up, I lose my copy of the agenda. So somebody can remind me what's next.
Next, we are transportation.
All right, then this is more complicated.
I like starting with our priority actions and then going down from there, as opposed to looking at the giant spreadsheet. But Joey, it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me.
Okay. So can one of you share?
We just saw it.
Yeah, it was just up there. Can I go back?
I loved it. We had all three priority actions.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. It is true. We had those
Wait,
three up.
where'd it go? I don't know, Liz, were
Was
you
that
sharing?
was Amler sharing?
Sorry, yeah, I'm trying to apply my tech stuff. Which one? The last slide?
So we were just looking at, which was just below electricity's.
Okay, yeah, I'll share that. Yep.
It had all the priorities. And just in the templates then, Liz, I'd suggest we put, like, is there a way in the full list of recommendations to highlight which ones are priorities so that when someone is looking at the spreadsheet,
Yeah,
you know,
we're gonna
they
do
can
that.
see.
So
Great.
when everyone sends their subcommittee, and all the electricities as well, templates, we'll highlight what the priorities are.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Is this the right slide, or should I go to
Yeah,
some?
well, yeah, it's nice seeing all three of them together, but we're looking at the middle one. And
Yeah, transportation.
those are our priorities, and we can delve more into other strategies around these things and in addition to these things, if we want to.
Okay.
I mean, we could start with these 4 items and discussion on that, but it's up to you. We've already done that, haven't we? We did that already.
Yeah, I think the priorities have been pretty well vetted and we just wanted to get the rest of the subcommittee's eyes on the additional actions and have an opportunity to ask, hey, what does this mean? What are we aiming for here? I'd suggest maybe 5 minutes of people quickly going through the Excel spreadsheet the transportation put together and just having that moment to put their questions together.
Sure.
Does everybody have that in front of them? I can pop the link in the chat.
I could also share that if that's
Sure.
yeah.
Uh,
Are we ready to begin discussing some of these, or do people want more time?
Let's dive in.
So I'm not sure exactly where folks want to start, if there people want to raise anything beyond what was raised at the full council meeting. Two things I just wanted to raise was the erroneous omission of advanced clean trucks. I don't know how that's not in there, since we've already adopted it, the goal being to maintain, sustain, stay the course and defend.
Wait, Joey, can you be specific on which action you're talking about? Because it's in there
It is?
in action 3,
Strategy 1, action
right?
3.
Pathway 2, strategy 1, action
Maybe it
3.
was just in the, I mean, this, I think part of the challenges, and this I've noticed at the council meeting, is that we're distilling things to keep things succinct, which is what we presented in terms of our priority recommendations to the council. And some of the things that seem like core concepts are omitted, or core programs like this, and it is not reflected in a couple of other documents. So I do see it here, but I don't see it in other places. So I just, in terms of consistency and clarity on what we are actually recommending, I'm just flagging that it has been, like, in what Liz just shared in terms of the distillation, it only spoke to advanced clean cars too, not advanced clean trucks. So just flagging its omission in some places.
It's been incredibly challenging to figure out what spreadsheet we're talking about when, particularly when we can't get onto the spreadsheets to know what it is we're editing. I'm completely confused, and I know what we contributed. I'm just not sure where it is on these various spreadsheets. And if I can't figure it out, God hope that the public can. It's
I
just
think this is a general, what we've been reviewing is a general reflection of where we've landed. And what I'm suggesting is in some of the more distilled versions of trying to narrow it down as we talk to a broader audience, I think some things have gotten lost in translation. So I'm not raising, I'm just flagging that, and I just wanted to ensure that, like, be clear about what we were.
I would like to work with the staff on a distilled version that is comprehensible to the public, to us, to the Climate Council. And you may lose some of that giant spreadsheet that we love so much, but it's to the point where we can't be clear because we've had to fill in all these places in the spreadsheet. I mean, maybe I'm the only one here that doesn't have my bureaucratic bona fides going. I'm just having a really hard time with this whole exercise. And you younger, smarter people got it more than I do. I know there's we had some critical priorities and we got some critical actions, and we know what they are. I just can't find them on the spreadsheet.
I think what we need to do, we lumped because it seemed to be the best path forward to articulate what our priorities were. But then the spreadsheet here that's linked in the public meeting calendar, so people should know what we're all looking at. We should be all looking at the same thing. They're broken down more. So I was just kind of going through and trying to say, okay, this action goes with this priority that we did, and it's not easy to do. So I think we as a task group have a little bit of work to do when we finish adding the status of what we're proposing. We need to add that status column in there. So maybe there's a little bit more opportunity to wordsmith a bit and be clear from this larger spreadsheet, what the priority actions are, if that's the way that it's going to be presented to the writer, which I think Joey is the point of contact for the writer for the transportation. So, yeah, I still think there's some room for wordsmithing. And
Could we do a spread? I love Thermal's presentation. Can't we just do something like that? That's just very two or three columns. Boom, boom, boom.
well, all it is taking off some of the columns on the spreadsheet, right? It's not.
Yeah, things are just said over and over again.
Mhm.
I thought buildings did an excellent job, and I could look at it and understand it. And we could do the same thing too if we're not locked into the giant spreadsheet.
I think I'm confused on what you're talking about, Gina, to be honest. We all had the same format to present our priorities to the Climate Council, and we all used the same exact format, I think.
What we just looked at for buildings and thermal was very digestible and easy to understand. Could we follow that format in terms of strategies, actions, priorities, strategies, actions? I'd be willing to play around with it.
I don't know. I don't understand.
Or
I
is
feel like we're
that
all
too-
using the same formats for each thing. So I'm
So,
sorry. to be
sorry.
confusing.
Just to jump in, so we do have the spreadsheet as a deliverable, and that's for all the task groups. Buildings and thermal actually hasn't gotten there to like
Oh,
completing
they have to do it
the
too.
spreadsheet. So that's the product, and I know there's
Oh,
sensitivity.
I see.
So the language, like I see the spreadsheet as like where we capture all of the language and the precise language. In buildings and thermal, there have been some really nuanced conversations around precision of language, and I imagine in transportation too. So that's really like the complete product that's coming out of the task group, and so that's our deliverable that we all have to do. And Gina, I
okay.
completely empathize with
So
what you're looking for is something to communicate those strategies, especially the priorities,
To talk
in a
to
more
people
digestible
about-
way,
Right.
which I think you all have latitude.
Yeah,
to do.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So buildings and thermal is going to be doing that big spreadsheet too. They just haven't gotten around to it.
All have
Okay.
to fit into that box, and that's the deliverable, and that's the absolute, complete set of language that everybody agrees to, presumably, before it goes to the council. And then we have to figure out other ways to make that information digestible
Yeah.
without losing core concepts, to Joey's point, right? So a leap was made from the precise language to a PowerPoint presentation, and some language got lost. So that's the tension there.
All
Okay.
right.
So
keep my mouth
then-
shut.
Let me make an observation about action number 1 in pathway 1 on cap and invest. I just want to suggest a wording change. In the action item, it says establish the authority for A&R to set a cap and collect proceeds for revenue generation. I think it would be useful to add the following: to collect auction proceeds for investment in emission reduction and consumer benefit. We're not really doing this just to collect revenue. We're doing it to invest revenue.
I'm fine with that. If you want to put it, do you have that?
Too.
You can type up in the
Yeah.
chat.
And maybe it should be plural: emission reductions and consumer benefits.
Still on that, does that preclude resilience funding, or is consumer benefits broad enough? Because I think
I wasn't
it wouldn't
meaning
just be
to.
mitigation.
Yeah, I wasn't meaning to exclude it. Yeah, I think saying for resilience, investments in resilience, emission reduction, and consumer benefits.
I mean, I wonder, is it consumer or like public benefit? And that could be all inclusive.
Well, the reason I was calling that out was the realization that we may indeed decide if and when the time comes, on a specific low-income rebate portion of the capital
Yeah.
investment.
Right.
I guess my point to Melissa's point, building off of your point, is that I appreciate what you're raising, and I just wonder if the concept of raising revenues for public benefit would be encompassing of some sort of ratepayer protection or resilience investments at the community level.
It includes all three, but I think the point that I would recommend that the council take is that it's not, I mean, it's public benefit if it just goes into the general fund. And we know that emission reduction is going to depend on targeted investments, and ditto for resilience.
Mhm.
Can
So
we
I think,
tie it to GWSA? Are those all?
oh, there we go, to the goals of the GWSA. How's
Great
that?
recommendation.
Good suggestion.
Mhm.
For the revenue generation to achieve the goals stated in the GWSA. How about that?
Mhm.
Gina, your hand popped up.
Yeah, are you talking about making sure that those who can least afford to pay are compensated, or through this program, we will protect consumers?
Well,
Is that what you're talking about? And by referring to the GWSA, we'll get there?
yes, that's, I mean, the equity goal of the GWSA is pretty explicit, so I think it's covered. So, I mean, this conversation has pointed out, if we were there at the point of adopting a cap and invest program, I am pretty certain that we would want to see the revenue invested in emission reduction, improvements in resilience, and low-income mitigation, or
Right.
low-income support, whatever term you want to use. And the GWSA already lists those as the principal goals. So I think Melissa had it right. Okay.
So can we,
So-
I'm not sure where we landed. I got as far as I was able to record
All right.
in the chat.
Auction proceeds for investments to deliver the the goals of the GWSA. And let's just work with that if somebody may want to wordsmith that. Okay, sounds like we're there. Moving right along.
Well, just really quickly, can I ask a process question and establish authority for A&R to set a cap and collect option for investments to. Yeah, I would change goals to targets, but I take that as a friendly amendment, and then I would happily move on.
The targets are the emission reductions, and then all the other stuff aren't really, there is no targets for equity
Okay,
or
well then,
investment in resilience.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean,
Well, you could say emission reduction targets and other goals of the GWSA.
great. Let's do that.
Are we good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That makes sense to
All
me.
right.
I have a separate question. It's more of a process point, I guess, if we can move on. But I appreciate. Yeah, that looks great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Rich. One question for you, just looking at all the public comment that has come in of late. And like coming in from, for example, Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission put together some really thoughtful comments, some specific comments related to transportation. I guess my question related to process is how we could potentially, I mean, what's the forum or opportunity to consider those and potentially weave them in?
My understanding at this point is that that has to happen at the council, that this is essentially a handoff from the subcommittee of our work to date. And if further refinement of these has to happen, it either has to happen at the council level or the council would kick it back to the subcommittee and ask for a revision. But essentially, we're out of time is what the message I've gotten.
Okay. Then I do think it would be important just for, as we invite people to make comment and, you know, ask them to offer input, we want to be clear about where that input is landing and how, you know, just our wherewithal to actually integrate it. Because I thought that was kind of really useful, and I appreciate your point, and that makes sense to me. I just want to.
Yeah, what channel did that feedback come through? Is it because we're getting feedback on a continual basis that the Climate Action Office is collecting on behalf of the council and then funneling to subcommittees.
Yeah, I just it came through the amassed distillation of all the comments on at this week's council meeting is where that particular input came from.
I can't really answer the question, Joey, about how we're going to do it, but clearly there is going to be a lot of public comment coming to the council and in the public comment period after the initial draft is issued. And we're going to have a process for cycling those comments, either just back to the council and have the whole council try to deal with it, or more likely, as you know, just alluded to, the council will ask subcommittees to take a look at all this input and suggest amendments. So we've got a long process ahead of us where a lot of comments going to be coming in. We can't amend every single time we get a comment. We need to batch them. Christine?
I'm wondering if someone could summarize briefly their recollection of how this dynamic was handled last time. Because I don't have any direct knowledge or memory of that.
Last time there was simply insufficient time to meet the statutory timeframe to actually go through a process of cycling public comments back through the process.
Oh, no wonder I don't remember it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's why you don't remember it this time. One of the reasons why we're facing the deadline we're facing right now is, sorry, one of the reasons we're, in a jam right now is to permit sufficient time for that public comment to be cycled back through. So that's why we're advancing things right now.
And presumably CBI will be helping develop the architecture for that?
I can't comment for sure how it's going to happen.
Okay.
Steering committee members can probably comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
I have my hand raised about this editing process. So what we're doing today is not one and done. The council's going to look at it. they're going to get public feedback. And then does the amending happen at their level, or does it come back to us?
Liz, do you have a comment on that? Liz Miller?
I think it depends on what the council chooses, Gina, and then my presumption, just based on the meetings I've attended, is that if it's particularly substantive, it's likely to come back to the subcommittees. That's what's happened in the past. So, but it is, I think, up to the council to decide how much question is generated and desire for changes, and then decide whether the process will just stay at the council level or instead get kicked back to the subcommittee. In either case, obviously through these public meetings, and if anything does go to a task group for revision, it would have the same process as now, where it would have to come up to a subcommittee or to the council in order to have that review and public process.
So back to Joey's point about CCRPC's comments, those could very well be coming back to us.
Yeah.
If the council deems that they're...
That's right. I do think, like, and I think this could be a way forward if there were comments like that as a subcommittee we knew should be further vetted and incorporated, in addition to sending the recommendations of the actions as described to the council. We could say that. We could say, and our recommended process is that you give us feedback on what we've done so far and give us a chance to review further public comments, particularly XYZ.
I like that.
I know time is short, but we still do have, it's January, and, final adopted plan is published in July. So I do think there's still time for that process if it's narrowed and warranted like that.
So
Dave?
Rich, could that be pointed out to the council when we pass this?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that this is, something that all the committees face. And so the council is going to have to figure out how to incorporate comments that are coming in from all over in the next 4 months or so. Dave?
Thanks, Rich. So I have a recommendation that has implications for pathways, actions under pathway 2, actions 2.2, 2.3, 4.2, and 4.4. And I'd like to just explain the recommendation and then come back and explain the connection to those 4 actions. My recommendation is that the CAP direct the Department of Transportation, 1, to publish and annually update a list of EV registrations in Vermont, and 2, the related zip codes of EV owners. This is going to provide a baseline, and it's going to be fundamental for Vermonters understanding, the process we're making with respect to EV adoption. We don't have that. It's not publicly available, and it's information that it's just as basic as a greenhouse gas inventory, and we don't have it. Not being able to make a baseline, not being able to start with a baseline, you just don't know how you're proceeding. Now, the reason it informs those actions that I mentioned, I can explain really briefly here. 2.2 has to do with supporting EV adoption program eligibility based on data and tracking. 2.3 has to do with supporting EV charging rates across utilities. I understand that, 4.2 has to do with promoting managed charging, and 4.4 has to do with promoting customer participation in managed charging programs. Now, I know that somewhere in the Department of Transportation, there's an analyst who can put his or her hand on that information. My point here is that should be public, and that nobody's privacy will be affected if simply the EV registration, what type of EV it is, and what the zip code is made publicly available. That way you can find out how many EVs you have. Next, how many you're controlling, which utilities are controlling those EVs. And it's just basic information. It's there right now. This should not be expensive. It's not been expensive in other states to make this information available. And just the last point here, when the Utility Commission produced an Act 55 report on electric rates for electric vehicles, that was sent to the legislature 2 years ago, this January. I talked with a staff attorney about the paper. It was a really good paper. I said, but none of this basic information's there. And he said, yeah, we couldn't get it. And it's available. And any transportation plan that's going to rely on electrification like we are here, not having a baseline number for the public as to what you have for EVs in your state and which ones are being controlled is just a head scratcher for me. I don't understand it.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave, are you aware of the Vermont Transportation Energy Profile? It's compiled every year by the University of Vermont, funded through VTrans, because that includes the data that you're asking about. I just quickly Googled it. Andrea's not on anymore, but there was one done in 2021. I don't know if there was any follow-up. It's on VTrans's website and the University of Vermont's Transportation Research Center. DMV has that information. It's readily available. So I think we need to take this conversation offline, but I think Andrea can, and she's unfortunately left. We back in my day, we compiled that every year. And DMV, it's an easy download from DMV. It's not a big deal. And Jonathan Dowd, who was at the Transportation Research Center, I think he works in government for now somewhere in DC.
Do we know what kind of vehicles they are?
Yes,
Number one.
by models. By models. It's DMV data. So we know
and do we have the zip codes so we know where they are in the state?
Yes, it's all the registration data.
That's great. Then just
I can send you a link to the profile.
See, I don't need the link. See, the public needs the link is my point here. And taking the discussion offline, I've done this offline with folks and it doesn't go anywhere. Making it available here so somebody doesn't have to go look there for it is my point. I'm glad we have it.
Well, and Drive Electric Vermont too could make it available. That's the place to.
Yeah, they used to have it, and I was just looking for it, and there's a link, a dead link to the July 2024 registration data. Right. So I was right with you, Dave. I was like, yeah, Drive Electric Vermont has done this all the time, but they took it off their website.
It may be that VTrans stopped funding that research work at UVM. So I don't know. I wish
that part I don't know, but for sure that used to be, like, again, as recently
I worked
as
hard
last
on
July,
that. Vermont
that data was
Transportation
publicly available from Drive Electric Vermont in exactly the form you were talking about, Dave.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me
call Dave Roberts. Dave.
I talk with Dave Roberts all the time. The point is that the Department of Transportation, the original source for this, is sourcing it out to others. And it could simply be made available at the Department of Transportation, updated annually with that precision.
Dave, do you, number one, do you have language that you would suggest adding to a specific somewhere without putting it in all the 5 places that you named? Number one, if you can you give us a sentence? I'll give you a few minutes to come up with it while we do something else. The moving, looking at the agenda for today, we are, woefully behind and not quite sure how we're going to deal with this as a subcommittee. So, here we are, at the end of our appointed time almost. And I'm asking people for recommendations as to how we proceed. Melissa, do you have a thought?
I don't know. Do you think we can strive to finish transportation? We got through electricity and non-energy, and beg for more time on buildings and thermal. We're not going to cover buildings and thermal in 7 minutes. So
Right.
I guess I'd say another opportunity for public comment on everything we've heard to date, and then see if we can get agreement on, or identify no areas of non-consensus on the transportation piece.
Right. Are there areas of non-consensus on the other issues in transportation? I can say I read through them and thought they were pretty well put together.
Gina, is that a lingering hand?
Gina? Is that an old hand?
I think it's lingering.
Yeah, okay.
I agree, Rich, that I'm comfortable with the list of recommendations. The only thing I would say is I do have questions and comments about the impact, cost effectiveness, and co-benefits that we're not going to get to dig into now. But with that caveat, I'm comfortable with the list of recommendations. And again, just hope the subcommittee has a chance once the modeling is done to come back to those. I see a lot indicated as high impact, high cost effective, and I just would want to push on those assumptions.
All right. Well, so in addition to making the point to the council that we want the opportunity to respond to the public input that's coming in all the time, and that we might want to recommend changes based upon those public comments. In addition to that, Melissa, you're suggesting that we might want to have a further review by the subcommittee on the high, medium, and low scoring. And we might want to recommend some changes to the council. So those aren't totally locked in. It seems appropriate.
Exactly.
And oh, so Brian's got language. The CAP direct VTrans to publish an annual list of EV registrations and related zip codes. Is that okay, Dave? It's in the chat.
I think, yeah, I think it almost captures. I appreciate that, Brian. Publish and annually update a list of EV registrations in Vermont and the related zip codes of EV owners. So the combination of those two would be my preference. But thank you for.
I would just add through the Department of Motor Vehicles, because they're the holders of the data. I know they're part of VTrans, but I just think it's important to specify that. VTrans doesn't have
Direct
DMV.
VTrans to publish through DMV.
That's through DMV data.
And annually update a list of EV registrations
by zip code.
By zip code.
By model. Models are important.
All right. By vehicle model and zip code.
But is it able to do town instead of zip code? Because many of our zip codes cover 3 or 4 towns.
I think you're getting into privacy issues. I don't know.
We do get that data when requested. So
you get it from DMV?
Yeah, because we're required by 174 to provide our towns with current use estimates. So it's a challenge, I'll say.
It is to get DMV to do it.
It'd be great. Yeah, I think Dave does it at Drive Electric, and I'm not sure how. A year ago I could have told you exactly how, but
yeah, it's a bureaucracy challenge we're talking about here.
I guess the question right now, the language is zip code, and if Brian's keeping track of the amendments that folks have made, I did ask. I mean, I wondered to myself about towns rather than zip codes. Living in a town that has something like 8 different zip codes because we're on the edges of everybody else's zip codes.
I guess the question is, how important is geography to this?
Yeah.
I guess you're trying to overlay service.
Well, we do it. We're supposed to try to provide that data to towns in Act 174. So it'd be great if that data was available.
Okay. Yeah. Zip code and or town.
So regional plan, I bet there are folks at the MPO who can answer that too, Dave.
Brian, thank you. All right. I think we should call this one done. And I haven't heard any other concerns about non-consensus items. So we have the opportunity now to decide that we have material to present on non-energy and transportation to the council. We haven't gotten to thermal, and we have priority actions on electricity, but not more.
I do feel like we've discussed thermal a good chunk of our meeting, so I would be reluctant not to include it unless people feel otherwise. But I mean, if people have had time to review, I just do think that it's been the majority of quite a few of the earlier meetings, and so I don't know. I feel like it would be fair, unless other people feel otherwise, to with a quick review, push that with the rest.
I think we've made some substantive changes that folks need to review, and the public needs to be able to comment on if they're inclined to.
So Dave, do you have a recommendation for how we can advance the ball here, either before the next council meeting or after?
Well, the next council meeting is the 17th tomorrow, correct?
Our
Why-
deliverable is due to the council the 17th, but the meeting is the 27th.
7th. We could
Okay.
meet next week and just have a late submission to the council. And
That's what I'd recommend, Rich. If we have
Okay.
some time next week, Tuesday,
so
Wednesday.
let's try and find a time Tuesday, Wednesday next week to meet and go over the remaining materials. And before we close, let me ask if there's any member of the public who would like to address the committee on anything that we've discussed or not discussed today. All right, I'm not hearing any. So let's agree to that we have taken action to advance two of the test group recommendations, and we have the priority recommendations of electricity are already approved by the subcommittee, and all of that can go forward to the council, and that we're going to try and schedule an additional meeting to consider the thermal, and if there is additional electricity recommendations, we can look at that too sometime in the middle of next week.
Dave, do you think the substantive changes? I don't remember them being on the priority actions. I remember them filling in some of the rest. So I would amend that that we put forward our priorities from thermal still with the rest, and just keep the long list back, because I think that's where a bunch of them are, and I would really hate for that to get lost in translation.
Okay, so let's accept that as an amendment to my wrap up, that the priority actions, of course, can go forward, and the conversation next week can focus on the additional actions that the test group would like the full committee to sign off on. All right, thank you.
I do have a question. I'm sorry. I had thought,
sure.
and I could just be wrong, and I need to go, so I apologize, but I had thought that for buildings and thermal, there were some relatively consistent comments on the priorities that was going to at least cause the task group to consider small changes. Like, I just remember the one, because it was overlapping with our task group, about weatherization and electrification, or that sort of thing. And so I was concerned as to whether that happened, understanding that they weren't, regardless of how big they were. So it feels like we've made no changes, and including our task group. So I'm this is not casting blame, except for at all of us, including me, but it doesn't sound like any of our priority actions actually shifted. Is that right?
Liz, you
Dave,
cut off for part of that. I apologize.
the question is, are the priority actions in thermal, have they changed since we, as the full subcommittee, approved them?
I was looking through those earlier on here, just 1 second. I can't be clear with respect to weatherization.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So
Okay.
I
All right. So
I
that's
can't-
what
I
Liz
can't
was asking.
Yeah, I
say
don't think we
likely that
added
they
that
have. We
priority.
didn't.
All right.
I think it's still at the bottom of the long list of things to consider. I mean, we did spend hours in several meetings
No.
going back through everything,
No,
but
sorry. One of your priorities includes, anyway,
Yeah.
I would
So
have been okay with
Weatherization.
Sam's friendly amendment, except for I had questions about revisions within the priorities consistent with some of the comments that were made
Okay.
previously.
So-
So if we aren't sure, I would ask that just be something we could talk about.
right.
Keep them
So
for discussion.
here's my recommendation. I'm going to assume that we're going to be able to meet and we're going to be able to check off the priorities and also consider the others. If we don't have for some reason, can't meet, that the priority actions as previously approved by the subcommittee can be advanced to the council. And that at least gets us advancing all of our priority actions to the council. And let's hope that we can schedule a meeting next week to nail down thermal and any other additional actions in electricity. All right, listen, I appreciate greatly everybody's patience today, dealing with all of our logistical problems, and we'll try to make the next meeting very expeditious. And thanks to everybody.
Thanks all.